And welcome back. Welcome back to our part 2 of overcoming apathy. Yeah, and we tried to get an overview of what apathy means from a psychological perspective and started looking at apathy, the inability to connect, the inability to tune ourselves into things that promote life, that promote love, that promote growth. And this is a little bit of a tough cookie, yeah, when you say it this way. It feels different than when you are stuck in your own inner dialogue and tell yourself why you can't do things, and it all feels so justified. But let's just really bring this home. Apathy is a state of motivationlessness, a state of actionlessness, yeah, a lack of action, and an attitude, an inner attitude that somehow expects something to happen from the outside to give us enough energy, all right, to change something or to bring something into motion. Yeah, so apathy as an energetic state represents a state in which a person does not have enough energy, enough life force energy to bring about a positive change, yeah, that would lead toward more life force, more life energy, more motivation, more love in life, yeah, expression of love, expression of creativity, and growth. Yeah, and that's a bit tough to swallow because many of us are experiencing this as an overall state right now in this time where so many things in our lives are changing but not yet. So many things are sort of looming, but they're not coming into expression. And I'm mentioning this, in conjunction with things such as political changes, global changes, and so forth. There's so much that we are being told that is changing or that is going to change or that might be coming. A lot of these things fear-inducing, that on a collective level it has the tendency to pull us into a state of apathy. Not necessarily the psychological state, which is actual inaction, like sitting on the couch and not being able to get up and not brushing your teeth and not doing anything. Yeah, that would be the pathological expression. But from a spiritual point of view, a state in which we basically, stop or, disengage from, being the co-creator of our lives. Yeah, from being the author of our lives, or we somehow handed over the power of making positive changes, yeah, or even becoming able or being able to envision positive changes. Yeah, yes, you call it the waiting game. Yes, exactly. So get me right here. When I talk about apathy, I am talking about a state in which, as Cindy called it, you are more or less telling yourself that you can't do anything because you have to wait for something else to happen. You have to wait for anything from to get retired, or and then I can do things, or it has to be summer and then I can do things, or the leadership of my country has to change and then I can do things, or the things that have to do with your overall maybe job or relationship or whatever, where you sort of just waiting for something from the outside, something to happen, yeah, which is external, to cue you to act. One of the more subtler aspects of apathy, guys, is consumption. Yeah, consuming. And this is the tricky part. This is why I refer to this as tough to swallow. And I want you guys to take a moment here as you're listening to this to think about this. When you are experiencing yourself as someone, that kind of does his or her job, that works, on whatever the tasks are that you're being given, and goes to the store, buys food, cooks food, eats food, goes to sleep, goes back to work, this sort of machine-like execution of tasks. Yeah, and all you are really doing is, trying to get sort of past whatever it is that you have to do. You just sort of seeking relief. You just want to get done with the day or the job or the task or the project, and don't actually work toward anything. You just sort of consuming. You're becoming a part of a machine, that is sort of self-consuming. Why am I calling this consuming? Because you are using up your life force. You are spending life force, to run this machine or to be part of this machine, and you're using it up. Now, for the most part, this is not aware to us. It does when we get older. It does when we, if we've waited for retirement all our lives, to finally do all the things that we've always wanted to do, but then our physical health isn't what it used to be, and we start feeling restrictions there. Or our relationships are no longer what they used to be, or just simply our motivation, to engage with projects or tasks or creativity is diminished because we are not used to being active and actively participating in. We are used to being told what to do. And take this in here for a moment. That there is a difference between co-creating life and consuming life. And from the spiritual perspective, anything that is aligned to life force, to love, lovingness, the expression of love, and growth, evolution, is supported through all these, what we call, natural energies, all that surrounds us, that supports us, that nourishes us. But when we are in a state of consuming, and our main alignment is consumption, and this applies to spiritual knowledge as well, by the way. This is one of these things that I have been warning for years. It's this sort of illusion that we're working spiritually because we're listening to lectures or we're listening to people who talk about spiritual stuff. No. Just listening to it and taking it in, yes, it can, give you a good feeling maybe, or, can motivate you or even alleviate pain or, give you something, okay? But the reason why people like myself and, those people that engage themselves in doing these kind of lectures or workshops is to motivate you, to translate that into your daily life. And so even on the spiritual level, there can be a form of consumption. And so if you find ourselves in that state of consumption rather than co-creation, where we just sort of, use things up and don't actually contribute to anything, life, love, and growth, yeah, like bring something forward or bring lovingness into this world, or creativity, or making others laugh, making others feel better, making the world a more beautiful place, helping our community, working on things that basically serve a greater good. Yeah, this is not just coming from some intellectual understanding, that we all sort of have to do something for the greater good. No, this is an actual and very practical process of generating life force, of generating, of creating it and putting it into action. So when we talk about apathy, we're not just talking about, these severe cases. We're actually talking, or I am talking about a societal issue right now, namely that the overall alignment of people here in the Western world is reflected in states of apathy. That's a scale, so you have gradients there, but most people are living their lives as we defined it earlier, in this sort of machine-like consumption, using up of life force without contributing. And this is why this is of such an urgent nature. To look inside of ourselves and ask ourselves, well, where am I actually contributing? Where am I actually aligning, my life, my actions, my interactions, with something that expresses life force, that expresses love, that expresses beauty, creativity, and ultimately growth. So as a self-reflective task, not as a critique, but as in sort of the impulse to find that place within ourselves, that sort of centerpiece, as I called it in our previous the part here in part one, of who we are and why we came here. The big questions. Like, who am I and why am I here? So apathy for me as a spiritual teacher is a almost normal state now. Most people that I come across are in a state of apathy on some level. Mostly on the level of consumption, and even unfortunately in regard to spirituality. That there's no connection, no translation, in the end. In fact, there is, and we talked about this in part one, is sort of this inner dialogue, that prevents us from engaging with these bigger questions and also the expressions and translations of it, because we simply don't know how to. How can we, make a difference? How can we actively engage, all right, in co-creating our life and authoring our lives, without getting pulled into the material aspects. We talked about this in part one, like paying our bills and, making living and everything that belongs to this 3D material aspect of ourselves, without, sinking into this disconnected, disengaged state, that I call apathy. I find this the biggest subject of our time right now, because there is so much information that is contradictory, that is confusing us, and that is basically pulling us into this state, because we cannot really see in the future. As a matter of fact, and this is quite concerning for me when I talk to younger people, that a lot of younger people actually don't see a future anymore. Yeah, this used to be a thing, 50 years ago, yeah, when I was in school, but now it's an actual belief. And this is something that we really need to understand here, what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a whole sort of society stifled or paralyzed, okay, by some kind of looming doom, yeah, on one hand, and on the other hand, people more and more sort of crawling into their caves, yeah, and not seeing sort of any purpose in connecting with life, with love, and with any kind of growth. They cannot imagine it anymore. Yeah, and that's then, if you look at the slide here on the screen, these are the things that we talked through last time. These are then, sort of the consequences of that. Yeah, is that we, simply stop caring. We just don't care anymore. Yeah, and when we stop caring, guys, that's when something really, really big happens in us. That is when we disconnect from the source of all life force. That is when we, without knowing, make a choice that we no longer want to be connected to it. Life, love, and growth. And this concerns me and should, in my opinion, concern all of us, because knowing the power of our consciousness and the power that we have as humans in co-creatorship, our ability to basically create life force and bring this into the world in form of improvements, in form of growth, in form of any kind of evolution. Yeah, we've been focusing on technical evolution, technical improvements, making our life more comfortable, making it, less strenuous if you just compare our life today with what it was like 100 years ago. But that's just the technical part of it. Where is sort of our benefit? If all that technical revolution has basically created the opposite, namely that people stay in their homes, scroll on their phone all day, and no longer interact and use this time, that they have gained through the technological evolution. Can you see? Yeah, we did this, okay, in order to have more time. In order to what? In order to engage with the world more, to do the things that express our passion, that, get us basically to live more, and yet the opposite is happening. And so here in the March forecast, so this is right now here, I called the code breaker tool for March, learning deeper connection. Yeah, there's skills, okay, that are involved in deeper connection with people, with animals, with nature, with the cosmos, with all kinds of things that we can connect with. But the main goal is that we connect with this source of life force, the source that has brought us into existence, because that is basically where this energy exchange needs to occur. Now, we can argue that we can also have this energy exchange happen when we connect with other people, and I would full-heartedly agree with that. When we connect with other people on a deeper level, another big thing happens, and that is that we plug in. We are plugged into the greater sort of energy rhythms and exchanges that exist in the cosmos, and that is supported. In other words, yes, deeper connection with other humans is where this growth, this evolution occurs. But there are a lot of question marks around how to deeper connect with other people. Yeah, a lot of us believe that if we just spent more time with them, that would create a deeper connection. Yeah, or when it comes to like spirituality, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about spiritual things, that does not necessarily express a deeper connection. That does not plug you in. In order to be plugged in, okay, we need to first know, or at least begin to understand what it is that we want to get plugged into. And this is then where, the big sort of question arises, well, how can we discern that? How do we know what to plug into? How do we know what kind of spiritual belief or what kind of teaching or even sort of what kind of, I don't know, books we should read or movies we should watch, yeah, that can, foster and cultivate deeper connection. Yeah, and right here, yeah, is where I would like to suggest as a, sort of a tool, and I have a little typo here. As a tool, a spiritual reset. Really shifting our understanding of spirit, of, what this actually is that we are sort of exchanging energy with. And you've heard me talk about this many times. Like we need to know what spirit we're subscribing to, what spirits we are serving, and so forth. And you've heard me use the word discernment a million times over the past 20 years, okay? Because that is our biggest task, to discern whom we want to connect with, whom we want to live with, whom we want to spend our future with, whom we want to, sort of believe in, whom we want to trust, whom we want to do things with. Yeah, what kind of energy, I could translate that now, yeah, do we want to work with? And the reason why I call this a reset is because a reset is always when there's sort of an end of something old and something new starts. Yeah, not just how we know this from our computers, but also how, for example, nature does this. Yeah, in its natural organic cycles. Yeah, with the seasons and sort of the life cycle of plants and animals and so forth. There is a continual reset, and every time we reset, yeah, a slight improvement, a slight evolution takes place. And if I look at our societies and how we have been conducting relationships and how we have been conducting our relationship with spirit, I'm seeing extremely outdated ways of doing this. So my sort of provocation here is that we all need a serious spiritual reset. We need to recognize that there is obviously a higher power out there. You wouldn't be listening to this if you didn't believe that there was a higher power than you or your ego, for that matter. Okay, but that there is a higher power, yeah, that is basically running the show, that is feeding sort of this whole rhythm, this whole cycle here with energy. If it's only for the sort of initiatory, yeah, the activation energy, yeah, but there is an energy form here, yeah, that provides life. And we can go deep into the spiritual science of that, which I have done in many other lectures that you can find on my YouTube channel, but it's not even needed to go vertical here. This is just common sense. Okay, there's a huge sort of power that provides life, yeah, that infuses life into minerals, yeah, into chemical elements, okay, Yeah, and that is so big that it can turn planets. Okay, and we're sitting here and complaining about, I can't do this or I can't do that because I don't have enough money or I don't have the right relationship partner or whatever. So we have to put this into context. What is it that we want? And what is it that we are putting toward it? How are we fostering that? How are we cultivating that? How are we evolving that? That is what a spiritual reset is. And that is what can get us out of our apathy. Why? Because it does basically all these things that have been inhibited. It reconnects us with sort of this, what I call higher power or divine. Okay, because we start caring, we start paying attention to it, we start seeing, okay, that all this is there for a reason. And if all this is there for a reason, and I have the tools, I have the consciousness, some of us, more than others, yeah, but, I have the tools, and all I really need to do is to use them, to sharpen them, refine them, ennoble them, okay, to co-create, to author, my life or the life of the people that I come into contact with. And that's then sort of, the next level, because when you realize that you have that power on whatever level you are executing this, you're expressing this, you feel your soul's purpose. You will begin, I don't have to tell you that, you will begin to feel a need, like a hunger or thirst, from your soul to engage, to interact, to collaborate, to exchange, and go into this busyness, with spirit. To go into this exchange of life force where you, through who you are, not through what you do or what title you have or how much money you have, but through what you are, ennobling, refining, evolving that life force that is given to you into something higher. So for a spiritual scientist like myself, this is an enormous process. It's like alchemy. We have that power. All we really need to do, this is the second point here, like as far as, like mitigating these symptoms, these presentations, but we just need to make sure that the flow of that energy is possible. And guess how that occurs in us? That occurs through caring. Caring for what is going on in the world, caring for the person next door. And I'm not talking about, going to your neighbor and baking cookies for them every day. That's not what I mean. Caring for the world. I'm not talking about becoming an environmental activist either. Caring for the world, the piece of earth that you are standing on. The earth itself. The spiritual beings and the spiritual processes that are behind making all this possible. And perhaps even going as far, depending on how far you are with your understanding of these spiritual processes that are underneath all materialization, or manifestation processes, engaging with the spirit beings that are involved in that. If you can, sort of let go of your superstition or your fear of that idea that there are, in fact, beings, organisms, they're just sort of much higher in their consciousness than we are, that are contributing to all this, really existing for us sort of as a sandbox, to refine, to ennoble, to evolve, and to foster love. And this is then where, it gets tricky because, like the phenomenon right now is that most people actually misunderstand love and self-love, care and self-care. Checking out and eating a gallon of ice cream and watching 10 movies and not interacting with anybody is not self-care, guys. Now, we talked about this last time. That's disconnecting. And is it okay to disconnect from time to time? Is it perhaps even important to do that from time to time? Absolutely. You hear me talk about this in the forecasts all the time. But it's a matter of balance. It's a matter of finding the middle ground. And if you do this too much, and mind you, if you grow up this way, if you don't even know ways to connect with others in a direct way, all right, then you may forget how to do this, or you may become anxious. Yeah, you may develop social anxiety, or, sort of just, hostile thoughts to the world, that the world is out there to get you. That's where the self-destructive aspect comes in, the self-punitive aspect that I talked about last time. We have to feel into this. If some of our, alignments, some of our expressions are actually working against true care and true love. So again here, I'm pointing out sort of the urgency of that because it is such a strong phenomenon in our society, and it is so subtle that most people who suffer from this disconnect, who suffer from spiritual apathy, aren't even aware of it. They're not aware that their ailments, including their physical ailments, are fundamentally sicknesses of their soul. Not being able to trust that there is a life force, that there is a force there, that provides for them. Here in this quote, I summarized this as all sicknesses of the human soul are essentially the pain of not trusting in the love of our higher self has for us. Our higher self is a higher expression, the spirit being in us. When you study this a little bit, then you start differentiating soul and higher self and consciousness and so forth to a deeper degree. But here I often use these terms interchangeably. Your higher self as basically sort of the spirit being in you, the highest potential of your own form, that is just waiting for you to be brought into expression. Life after life, with the purpose of refining that and approximating, getting closer and closer to that highest form of co-creatorship. So in that I make this connection now, and I say this is the highest purpose of us humans, of all of us humans. And if we disconnect from that, if we sink into a state of apathy, we are no longer on our path, on our soul path. We are disconnecting with why we're here. And anyone who's ever been in that state knows how excruciating, how painful that is when you disconnect from the centerpiece of who you are, as I called it earlier, the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul, guys, is the most painful state a human can ever be in. And this is the tricky part and the sad part, is that all these coping mechanisms that we develop to not feel this pain are the ones that make us apathetic. Yeah? We talked about this in part 1, how it even comes to that. So basically, a spiritual reset is nothing but doing the opposite of what you're telling yourself you should do. With a few exceptions, but for the most part. Yeah? Your ego says, oh, you should stay here and nobody loves you and you're not good enough and the world is hostile and oh, what difference does it even make if I, and oh no, yeah, because, it's all bad out there and I'm bad. And that's why I choose not to connect. And the opposite would be to do it regardless, because it is the very thing that plugs you in and provides you with the energy that you need to make these positive changes in return. Does this make sense? It is the very thing that you are saying no to, that is needed for you, not only to get yourself out of that state, but more. To heal yourself, perhaps even, heal the people that you are in contact with, because you transcended that. You worked through this. You became whole again through working with this and not against it. And when it comes to spiritual stuff, unfortunately, the indoctrination that we all have, directly or indirectly, is that you have to be in a certain way. You have to be, without sin, or you have to be this or that in order to even be considered, to connect with this higher power. And unfortunately, that is also backwards. Because it is the very dark night of the soul that often leads us to experience that it is never too late to connect. And that it does not depend on how good you are, quote unquote. It only depends on your willingness to do it. And the world, and not just the people world, but also the spiritual world, is waiting for you to do this, to connect, to care, to interact, to exchange, to evolve, to participate in whichever way you can express your caring, your loving, your participating, your collaborating. And what we don't know yet, what we don't realize yet, is that we have a choice. Somehow we've been programmed, conditioned, indoctrinated to believe that we don't have a choice. That once you make one mistake, you are out, and that's it. And you only have one life, and that's your only chance, and that's it. Can you see that? Can you see what a mind trick that is? It is never too late, guys. Never, ever too late to choose to connect, to choose to exchange, to interact, to participate. Yes, but we do have to learn how to discern, how to know what to trust, how to know what to connect with. And I agree. Yeah, these things are tricky in our time because never before have we been bombarded with so much information. We never had all these choices. So what does that mean? Does that mean we have to kiss many frogs to learn how to do this, or is there maybe another way? Well, if you ask spirituality, and especially, spiritual science was a bit more systematic and a bit more sort of based on not one particular direction, but really the wisdom of all spiritual teachings that have existed in our written history here at this time around, you'll find some common threads, you'll find common denominators, things that are literally contained in any spiritual tradition. The first one, and this is actually not emphasized enough, is healthy routines, physical health. A healthy body produces healthy thoughts. And healthy thoughts produce healthy emotions and positive, motivating energy. We're being bombarded with diets and cosmetic surgery and crazy role models, okay, that drive us into really, really unhealthy routines, including, you know what I'm going to say. Yeah, things that are promoted as, it's good for your health or it prevents you from getting sick. Okay, this is something that we really need to tackle now. Because if we have an unhealthy body, and I'm talking, like from the core unhealthy, if we are in pain, if we are constantly experiencing sort of this sort of prison of not being able to doing things that we want to do, that does impact our psyche. It does impact our ability to connect. So health should be, for as long as we are on this planet, one of our main concerns. Now, health does not, on the other hand, determine our ability to co-create. But it is a lot harder to come up with this kind of energy, with these kind of thoughts, these kind of insights, okay, if you're constantly dealing with health issues. So what is it that we can do, and what if we find ourselves in a place where we already have health issues? Will. Whether it's the will to overcome our addictions, whether it's the will to overcome unhealthy behaviors, whether it's the will to simply go out, and I'm just naming this as an example, every morning, taking a walk in the morning, connecting with the sun, connecting with the trees, connecting with the planet, to plug in as a discipline. Yeah, to recognize that if I want to be part of something, if I want to interact and exchange and collaborate with something, I got to show up. And I'm not just talking nature. Of course, I'm also talking people or projects or community. I got to show up. And the other thing, and this is tightly sort of connected with the issue of apathy, is that apathy really drives a person to be self-absorbed. Yeah, and again, here we're talking more so about the spiritual type of apathy than the psychological, which is more of a physical condition. To be self-absorbed, to just care for like how I feel, what I'm thinking, what is going on in my life. Okay? Yeah, and when you actually, in a lot of therapies and a lot of spiritual disciplines, take that sort of as the first or second most important thing after caring for yourself, obviously, is to care for something outside of yourself. For something or someone outside of yourself. Be it offering help to your neighbor or, your friends, or, doing something for the community, or just, I don't know, planting beautiful flowers in your front yard to make the place a more beautiful place. Yeah, because you care for something, outside of yourself. Next is the cultivating of reverence for all these things that, for example, nature expresses through this life force that I keep talking about. A reverence for this, to actually take a moment to look at the butterfly or the dragonfly or the flower, or how animals move, how a tree grows, how ecosystems are constructed, whatever terms you want, but take the time to do this. It is amazing. There's a reason why, pure materialists like myself, I came from a very, sort of scientific, only nature, science, and so forth point of view, get more and more spiritual the more they actually interact with nature. In my case, it was chemistry. It's like, whoa, that's like, that inspires me. Because I see so much higher intelligence expressed in all of this. I mean, not even to mention the cosmos and all the deeper aspects of spirituality. Yeah, if you're interested in those, look at my videos concerning the spiritual hierarchies and the forces at work here and so forth. There is a cosmos of things to discover that motivated me to like, whoa, I know nothing. Yeah, and along with that, the feeling of wonder. Carl Jung talked about the wondrous child in us as sort of the healer. I see it as a teacher, like how kids respond to the world. With wonder, not with sarcasm or cynicism, but with like, whoa, this is amazing. Excuse me. Then the next thing is moral consideration, moral imagination. Meaning, what is the consequence of my choices? What is the impact? What does that do to others? And also, a step farther than that, if we all do this or that, what will that do to the world? And when I talked about my concerns earlier, I was talking about, hey, if we are all staying in a state of consumption and apathy, that's not boding well. And that is not because of like some warmongering or whatever. It's because of our choices. It is my moral obligation to talk about these things, to point you at these things, to give you these impulses, to feel this out. Yeah, and to come up with your own sort of moral consideration. And then last but not least, and those are the things that the practical things that we then want to learn to express, is actively participating in life. Life is not going to come to you. You have this body, sort of like an empty vehicle with an ego. You get that for free. Yeah, as I always say, but the stuff that you can do with it, you're going to have to choose them. You're going to have to develop them. You're going to have to work for them. Yeah, it's a constant refining, a constant working with things. And not just like, oh, I give it one shot, and if I mess up once, then everything is over, and then why should I care? Nobody cares about me. That's apathy speaking in you. Actively participating. If there is nothing that sort of lights your fire, okay, then create it. I've seen the most beautiful expressions of life force that I could have never think of, but that people can really, that can help them to engage with life. It could be anything. I experienced it with myself, but the funniest thing, and many of you know me long enough to know that this is true, I figured out that one of the card games that my kids play is something that lights my fire. I've become a Pokemon card trainer, Pokemon TCG card trainer, and I do this with full passion, and I do this on a community level. No other purpose than bringing joy to kids, and maybe also the teacher and me, because you have to read out what the card says, and it's usually 5, 6, 7, 8 to 10-year-olds that are interested in this, yes. But I love it. And I build little Pokemon with them, and I draw them, and I cut them out, and we even reenact them, and we play the game, and we train and refine our skills, and these kids are excelling, and they're going to tournaments, and you can say, well, how does that contribute to life, to love, to growth? Well, it does. These kids are motivated. They're getting off their screens. I teach their parents how to play it. I make them do this as a family activity. I make them become interested in something. I make them passionate about something. Just due to my own passion for it. So when people ask me, well, I don't know how to express this, I'm like, doesn't matter. Playing Pokemon can be a very spiritual activity if you know what you're doing, if you know why you're doing this. That's the moral consideration and the intention behind it, the alignment that goes with it. And to help to connect with other. And I always tell everyone that has like one-on-one talks with me, whatever works, guys, whatever works. For as long as the alignment is to deeply connect and to collaborate and to exchange, it's extremely spiritual what you're doing. You don't have to wear red socks. You don't have to wear crystals. You don't have to look in any certain way. You don't have to be vegan. No, that's all external stuff. You just got to be really passionate about it and feel the need to share it. Feel the need to have that life force that you are generating through your passion jump over to others. Ignite somebody else's fire. Ignite the light in someone else. That is a spiritual reset. And when it comes to spiritual exercises, I tend to wanting to show, sort of what actually comes out of all of us humans as sort of very fundamental exercises, the 6 basic exercises from anthroposophy or Rudolf Steiner here, that you can see. We talk a lot about it. We have weekly meditations, and practices and discussions about this. Yeah, the control or the mastering of our thinking, the mastering of our will, the mastering of our emotions, emotional intelligence, and along with it also the mastering of our body, fostering positivity, not false positivity, but a sort of positive life view, outlook on life, outlook on the world, on higher power, as I demonstrated this earlier, and an openness, a judgment-free and open and sincere interest in others, in the world, in your environment. And when you do this on a day-to-day level, when you allow that to become your being, then that not only increases, your well-being and, heals you, but it also increases your heart capacity, your capacity to connect with others. So in other words, as you are doing these disciplines or these exercises with yourself, this is all just with yourself. This is all just basically to clear out all the crud and all the stuff that you carry around with you. As you're doing this with yourself and then move on to, offering that to others, you are increasing your ability to connect more. And the coolest part about that is that connection comes to you. Not just you become able to connect more, others become able to connect with you. Not just better, but also deeper. So if we, like so many of us, struggle with the idea that there is not enough spiritual people out there, well, watch the video from just last week where I talked about the real-time self, the authentic self. If you still do things like the machine, like consuming type that we discussed here earlier, it's very difficult for others to connect with you, because they can't even see your passion, your heart, if you will, your life force. They can't even see that because you're still sort of trying to, I guess, comply with something that you told yourself will get you there eventually. And that is what can also disconnect. So I used the word coping mechanism, like all the shielding that we form, to, play the game or, not stick out or, sort of, at least for other people appear as normal. Those are the things that in a lot of cases and often lead to other people not really wanting to connect with us because they can't even see who we are. We have to choose who we are representing here, whom we want to live this life as, and how we're showing up. And that is how we can overcome our apathy, by choosing. And then, obviously bringing it into action, showing up and understanding, really understanding the mechanics and dynamics of connection. It's a two-way street. So I went off the rail here into lecturing, but we have a few minutes to ask you about your, maybe also experiences. What have you experienced can help you to pull yourself out of this state of apathy? What are some of the things that have worked for you in your life? If you don't mind sharing, if you want to share, go ahead. You can also share later or write it in the comments. What has helped you to overcome apathy in your life?
So I really like what you said about just do it anyway. That's the one way that I motivate myself is I don't care how much I don't want to do something, like even if it's go for a walk, something that I know is good for me. I really try to do it anyway. And you
That's like the
guys,
will. That's how you practice your will. You
yes,
just do it anyway. I mean, sometimes it can be difficult to discern whether it's the right thing or a good thing, but if it's not really contradicting any of your moral considerations,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if it's just sort of your laziness, right,
yes, exactly.
that you're up against, then yes, you nailed it. It's really just about doing it anyway.
Yeah. And the
Yep.
other
Being,
big thing that I've learned to do over the years is not use the word can't.
yeah, good point, Cindy. Language plays a huge role.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of our communication, and it starts with our inner communication, and obviously also is a very big part of how we show up, how we communicate ourselves to others. Yeah, and there's, in my opinion, way too many people right now out there that keep telling each other that they can't, all the stuff that they can't do. Very good point. But I wanted to say one more thing here about the will that I mentioned to you, Cindy. This doing it anyway. You know, make it an ambition. Prove to yourself that your will is stronger than your ego. Every single time you run against it. Every single time, that inner lazy voice, or that voice like, no, that whiny stuff, or the scaredy cat in you says, oh no, doesn't feel safe, and you do it anyway. Do it to make a point, to prove to yourself that your consciousness is more powerful than your ego. Those are very good tips already. If you guys know any other techniques or practical things that have helped you to overcome, or that you are in the process of overcoming, please share them with us here in the comments. Yeah, and let us all learn from this. Okay, if you guys are willing to share in the comments, I will put them all together and add them to the video as sort of the audience recommended activities. Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you very much. In 2 weeks, we're going to see each other again, and we're going to talk about how to overcome financial fears, material fears, yeah, that can hinder us, that can stifle us, that can, well, basically drive us into apathy, right? Many of us, yeah, actually find ourselves in a place of apathy because of financial fears. So I want to address this separately, yeah, because we can all get into a place like that through all kinds of events in our life, yeah, and it's good to know how to deal with them, yeah, when they arise. So in 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about how to overcome financial insecurity, material worries. Okay, I love you guys. Thank you so much for allowing me to send you this impulse, for allowing me to, share some of this life force with you. Okay, and thank you for your trust. Okay, stay conscious and see you soon.